Hi guys, I'm happy to say that this was a great reading month. Let's unpack this. I'll start with the cookbooks first. Foodheim, A Culinary Adventure by Eric Wareheim was a long-awaited book for me, and I'm happy to report that this book is great. I know it's easy to disregard him as a broy gimmicky actor slash celebrity who's riding his Master of None fame and using his newfound pasta slurping platform to shell out a cookbook, but that is far from the case. His genuine positivity and innate love for food shines and comes through from every word. And yes, you do hear his voice when you're reading, but that legit makes this book that much more fun to get into. He's a warm, cuddly, well-meaning, hopeful millennial hype man for the artisanal, craftsman, multicultural food lifestyle that he sincerely wants to share with the rest of the world and help make feel more inclusive than exclusive. With chapters titled Circle Foods and Green Foods, he wants to impart every aspect of his very fun and collaborative lifestyle, and he cites every single influence with adulation and respect. I was left in a feeling of bubbly positivity, wanting more green juices and classic cocktails in my life. I rave. Oh my god, this is such a long title. Maman, the Cookbook, All-Day Recipes to Warm Your Heart from the Beloved Bakery and Cafe by Elisa Marshall and Benjamin Samonte with Lauren Salkeld. I mean, that title says it all. So much gush, almost off-putting, but palpable how much work and effort was put into the details. Just look at the gorgeousness. This is one of Manhattan's most fashionable and hyped bakery cafes, famous for their chocolate chip cookies and drinks in their iconic blue and white patterned china. They're not even the only Manhattan bakery cafe famous for a chocolate chip cookie, which I haven't even tried, but will very shortly for the holidays, as this is an extremely party menu type of cookbook. Menu is very comforting and elegant, perfect for elevated holiday parties. The Bundt Collection, over 128 recipes for the Bundt cake enthusiast by Hart Hoffman, is a great Bundt compilation book if you're into that and want a lot of Bundt cake ideas in one book. I feel like Bundt cakes are a if you know type things, and this book is nothing special at all, most certainly not a need to have, and you could do well just by looking through Hoffman's Instagram account or the Bake Feed's Instagram account. I just saw so many of the recipes on Chubby Kitchen's Instagram and they look so good, and I personally love a good bundt cake, which is one of those comforting, decadent southern cakes that I gravitate to. They're the polar opposite of the light, airy Korean chiffon cakes that's so prevalent in my culture. So I needed it. Have I tried any of the recipes? No. Am I excited at the possibility to in the near future? Absolutely. I went to the Yoshitomo Nara exhibit at LACMA this month and bought the accompanying book, which is incredible and a prize in my art bookshelves. There's a multitude of details in the artwork that I know I miss seeing in person. You can stay and stare at everything for days. There's just so much cleverness and creativity and minutiae in Nara's works. Or you can buy this book and pore over them in the privacy of your own home. The essays aren't the most interesting, although I did like his work described as a blend of pop culture with Euro Old World art. But the Hart is a series of Nara's columns about his favorite and most influential record covers, written in a plain-spoken, straightforward manner. He wrote about being so impressed by not only Joni Mitchell's beautiful songs, but that she painted her album covers herself, and describes her as truly the epitome of an artist overflowing with expression. And I didn't know this fact either, and my mind was also blown. I also found it interesting how different papers and a non-standard binding are used to make this book, echoing the interesting grounds of his paintings. If you're a Nara fan, you'll have plenty to love in this book. Okay, now I need to talk about The Big Boy, the standout novel of the month. To be honest, I'm still processing The Overstory by Richard Powers, and I'm still tightly carrying it with me close to my heart. The 500 pages flew by. I'm still mulling over the diverse array of characters. I'm walking around, looking up, staring at trees, wondering what species they are, marveling at the texture of their bark and the shape of their leaves. I am not an outdoors person. I am very much so an indoors gal. And prior to this book, the only kind of nature I enjoyed is the heavily manicured type. This won the Pulitzer, it's heavily praised, and I'm merely joining in their ranks as a fan. The structure of the book is a marvel, split into 3 parts, with the first being like short stories introducing each of the characters, which are insanely beautifully written. Lyrical blunt prose. Something in the lone survivor knows that even the ironclad law of now can be outlasted. Farmers are patient men tried by brutal seasons, and if they weren't plagued by dreams of generation, few would keep plowing spring after spring. The midsection is basically the characters living the redwood summer during the 90s, where people tried to save the old-growth redwood trees from being cut down. It was the Occupy Wall Street of that time, where environmental activists lived in the trees and chained themselves to trees, trying to protect them from being cut down. And the final section of the book discusses the aftermath, and I know, you can anticipate the injustice already. I cried so many times. I felt so much for every character. I love this glorious book. This is the appropriate instance to use the word extraordinary. And the Game of Thrones producers are in production making this into a series, and I'm groaning. I've been trying really hard to not get too excited for it because they know what they did. Anyway, this is one of the big booktube books I've wanted to read since I started this channel, and I'm so happy I did. I am forever changed. I love when books make me feel this way. I read There Is Nothing for You Here, Finding Opportunity in the 21st Century by Fiona Hill. And unfortunately, I've forgotten who influenced me to read this, but I'm forever indebted to that person because this is great. It's got everything. It's a memoir, a Trump tell-all. I finally understand British class structure and the school system. Truly infuriating workplace misogyny/sexism, gender wage gap stories. The answers to the populism/Brexit/Trump questions I had. By the time the Trump impeachment happened, I was done with the hourly news, and unfortunately Dr. Hill's testimony slipped past me, so I was actually unaware of who she was and that this is a Trump tell-all book, but it's only so partially. What it mainly is a look at underserved and heavily deprived communities, which is where she comes from, and her story of how she got out via higher education and ended up majoring in Russian studies and marrying an American whose family are from Rust Belt states. Her identifying the patterns of what happened in all 3 of these former industrious towns and their homogenous communities points to the inevitable rise of populism and why those people voted for Brexit, for Trump, for Putin, which is all news that I'd been completely blind to being a coastal elitist, until very recently with more news and more books like this coming out. On Trump, one tidbit I found illuminating is that he saw himself as the guy on top, and guys on top only talk to and listen to other guys on top. The autocratic leader simply had more authority than the people who worked for Trump. The leader was his equal. His staff members were not. For Trump, information trickled down from him, not up to him. Jalen from the Bar on the Bookcase recommended the next book I read, The Right to Sex, Feminism in the 21st Century by Amia Srinivasan. It's a particular thrill of mine to read current events in hardback books. Thought-provoking, guilt-inducing. So many aspects I never considered, yet I confidently and unhesitatingly call myself a feminist. The sex work essay is particularly eye-opening. I lolled at the on not sleeping with your students essay. Is it too boring of me to encourage actually teaching your students and refrain from sexualizing them? Philosophy is alive and kicking, guys. It's all the more vital in our current contemporary life. The prevalence of critical thought is what's missing in our discourse, and there are nearly 100 pages of notes. Very impressive. I went camping over the Thanksgiving holiday and read 5 Tuesdays in Winter by Lily King. And we love her. I am still thinking of Writers and Lovers, and this short stories collection cements my love and firm belief that Lily King can do no wrong. She knows exactly how to get into my insides. Heartache, desire, assignations, mushroom soup. When in the Dordogne is my fave, closely followed by the title story. Alright, here's my one dud, and I mean dud. Taste, My Life Through Food by Stanley Tucci is a classic example of a mediocre book propelled by a charming celebrity and powerful marketing. This, not Foodheim, is a celebrity coasting on the coattails of success to sell a book. I found his writing really tedious, his persona insufferable, and I liked Stanley Tucci. He tells a story with the tone of, ooh, my charmed life filled with charming people, and yes, I have dealt with terrible loss and pain, but I heroically struggle through it all. The lack of humility and sugarcoating of his life and constant celebrity name-dropping are what ultimately made me find this dull and unconvincing. I wanted more amusing work travel anecdotes, more witty humor that I previously thought he had in spades, and instead he comes across as heavily self-centered and quite vain, making his common life story and family and food quirks that much more mundane. So I just couldn't end my reading month like that. I was on such a roll. Earlier in the month, I picked up In the Weeds, Around the World, and Behind the Scenes with Anthony Bourdain by Tom Vitale. But I was weeping after the first chapter, which describes how Vitale, who'd spent the past 15 years working as an assistant, then editor, then producer and director, one of the OGs of Anthony Bourdain's TV show crew through all of its iterations, found out that his star had killed himself and he is suddenly unemployed. So I put it down, then picked this back up again to cleanse my palate of the Tucci, saccharine fakeness. And man, oh man, was this exactly what I needed for that. Bourdain died in 2018, and this book is Vitale's pandemic lockdown baby, when he had nothing but time and space to unpack his complicated, conflicting thoughts of his relationship with his difficult boss and his effort to gain closure with his death, even describing an emotionally climactic conversation with Bourdain's ex-girlfriend, Asia Argento. I love Anthony Bourdain then and still, and if you too are a fan, I think this is a must-read. But what really got me is how raw, how nakedly he grapples with his still inconclusive feelings, while illuminating the complex character that is Anthony Bourdain and how sensitive he was, how often he said on camera that he's unhappy and this is inevitable. Hard to be around, painful to be away from. He talks about how everyone would ask him about his supposed, quote-unquote, best job in the world, but all he can recall is the overwhelming stress and his inferiority complex, which I found so relatable. As a fan, I appreciate how real he got, telling stories both good and bad about our collective hero. And overall, I love how utterly human this is. That's everything I read in November 2021, and I think I had such a good reading month, not just because everything was of high caliber, but also because of so much diversity. Art book, cookbooks, short stories, a great novel, memoirs, theory essays. I think I'll have to be more cognizant of this varied book diet going forward. I hope you all had a good reading month as well, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Bye!